Let me turn off the lights and we can get started. All right, so this is kind of where we left our project off last week, or the last time we met. At this stage of the game, we have all of our model, or we have all of our geometry, we have all of our UVs, and we have all of our textures. Now, I want to go over some important concepts today, and these are really mission critical to ensure that we get all of our stuff out of Modo cleanly and correctly, and that's the most important bit here. This is probably the first time for a lot of you guys that you've had to export your model from Modo in a file format that's compliant with a number of different applications out there in the market. Okay? So this export procedure is mission critical. It is really, really important. There's some house cleaning that we have to do before we get going, though. Okay? Let's jump over into our item list and examine the current state of my project. And as you can see, there's a lot going on in here. Okay? There's a lot of elements inside of my project file that I don't necessarily need or want to send over into Unity. Okay? Last semester and last year, I prescribed a whole kind of outline for exporting our models out of Modo cleanly, but in 701, they've added finally, a very special command that allows us to export selected and individual items from the item list. In the past, you had to export everything that was in your project file. Well, now you can export out just the items that you want. However, we have to make sure that each of the items that we're trying to export from our project file are in good standing order before we go too much further. Specifically, we've got to look at the UVs. Okay, we've got to look at the UV maps, make sure everything's groovy. And here it is, forged parts, okay? And specifically what I'm looking for here is I need to have one UV map, okay? One UV map per item, okay? One UV map, okay? Say again? That's a relief. I got more than you started to say. One UV map per item, okay? If you have more than one UV map, Unity is not going to know which UV map to apply all your textures to. Okay? Unity and most game engines are ridiculously simple machines, okay? They're only going to read what's fed to them, and if they're fed a whole bunch of UV maps, they're going to get confused, okay? We're about to enter into a very strange conceptual environment where we can't control our vertices, edges, and polygons. We can't really work with our UVs. The only thing that we're going to be able to work with is an item, and over in Unity, it's called a game object. So we got to make sure our project file is in good standing order before we go away. Yeah?
You said items, you mean per mesh or per actual file?
Per mesh. Per mesh, yeah. So we're only going to be able to control things in Unity at the item level. We can't really go in and start moving verts and polys around anymore. That feature is gone and starting in about 5 minutes. Okay? All right, so I'm happy with this. This is rock and roll. This is fantastic. So the UV map is where I want it to be. Next, we got to make sure that we go over and start looking at all of our materials. And specifically, we need to make sure that each one of these material groups is named cleanly and correctly. Okay? This chunk of information is going to follow the project file. A couple things are going to be sent to Unity. Of course, the actual geometry, the UVs, and all of the materials that are associated with the polygons on that mesh, okay? So it's critical that we have very clearly and cleanly named material groups so that we can make sense of all of this stuff over in Unity, okay? What we're ultimately trying to do here is set up our project file and our model to integrate very just beautifully into the Unity workflow. If you deviate from this, it's going to make working in Unity a little bit more challenging, okay? Unity is not Modo, okay? They don't pull any punches over in Unity. They force you to be very good stewards of your scene to make sure everything works correctly, okay? All right, now I'm happy with the name, happy with all the names of my materials. I'm going to eliminate the ones that I don't necessarily care about. I'm going to get rid of shingle because that has to do with another project or another part. Let's just delete it. And I'm also going to get rid of shadow catcher. There we go. You know, at this stage of the game, I would absolutely recommend, I would absolutely recommend that you make like a new version of your Luxology project file. it's important that you kind of remember and separate out from your media management system which files are being sent to Unity. So make a new version of your LXO. It makes a difference, okay? Whenever I'm exporting something over into Unity, I almost always append it with Unity. So here's a new version. Do version 4. And I'll just say Unity. That way I know that this is the version of my Luxology project file that I exported. If there's a problem over in Unity, I'm going to come back to version 4, not version 3.
At this point, we should have Unity on our home computer.
It's recommended. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah. Okay. So, last step. Got to go back to the item list and select the item that we want to export. In my case, I want to export out rough. That's the item inside my project file that contains all the geometry for this project. Awesome. Okay. So here's the magic keyboard shortcut. It's kind of buried, and the guys at Luxology honestly don't do a very good job of advertising that this feature exists, but it is there. If you were to right-click on an item in your item list, check it out. Export selected layers. This is the command that's going to allow us to extract just this mesh item from the rest of our Modo project file and save it out in its own self-contained file. Okay, so let's just do it. Export selected layers. All right, so this is actually really kind of important because there's, as you would imagine, there's a whole series of files that we can export into. There are 3 formats that I would like to draw your attention towards. Okay, 3 new file types. Now we're physically converting our model file from a Luxology project file, an LXO, into an industry standard cross-platform file type. Ultimately, if we do this correctly, this model file will be able to be imported into a whole series of other apps. Okay, but there are 3 that I want to draw your attention to. First is the FBX, Autodesk FBX. And notice that there's 2. There's 2010 and 2013. Use 2013. It has the most recent kind of formula, if you will, algorithm for this file format. The Autodesk FBX file is an industry standard cross-platform file format. It's owned, as you would imagine, by the lovely guys down at Autodesk. Okay, it's been around for probably about 10 years or so, and it's a really great file format. It's custom and specifically built for the motion capture day. FBX actually stands for Film Box, and Film Box was a phenomenal motion capture animation program in its early days that was eventually bought by a company called Cadera, and then that was bought by Autodesk, and it turned into Autodesk FBX. And the cool thing about this file format is that it's going to grab a lot of different features inside of your project file. Specifically, of course, it's going to grab your model, your UV, and all of your materials, but in certain situations, if you export it correctly, it'll actually grab all your cameras and your lights and your animation. It's almost like an entire scene format, and that's why the guys on Autodesk love it so much, because they're all about exporting entire scenes from one application to go into Motion Builder, or another scene to go into Mudbox, or their Maya scene to go into Softimage. The Autodesk guys have a huge suite of programs that, and they needed a file format that can go between all of those. So this is a good one to use. It's not my favorite. It's my second favorite. You know, I use FBX a lot, but the problem that I found with FBX is that it is proprietary file format. It's owned by the guys down at Autodesk, so they get to control the development and feature set of this format, and that kind of makes me a little scared. And the guys on Autodesk have a very strong track record of releasing new updates that completely break the previous versions of whatever it is that they updated. When I was working at MTV, we went from Maya version 4 to Maya version 5, and there were like 2 different applications. The upgrade was so horrible that we downgraded back to version 4 because it was unusable, okay? Because everything in 5 was broken, and it didn't integrate into our existing production pipeline. So that's why I'm always a little hesitant about the FBX file format, is that the Autodesk guys, they're going to do their own thing, and they're kind of like the 900-pound gorilla, right? They can do whatever the hell they want because they have Maya and 3D Studio Max in their back pocket, right? They are the Adobe, if you will, of the 3D industry. Or they think they're the Adobe of the 3D industry. I would argue with that very much. So they kind of have a strangle grip on this file format, and it changes every year, which is why there's an Autodesk 2010. There's actually, every year, Autodesk releases a new version of the file format that historically has broken the previous versions of the file format, which is bummer, okay? 2013 is pretty stable. It's a good format. It's not the best, okay? Well, the best is kind of a moving target. It's a good format. So this is an interesting one to export out. It's cross-platform, so it's Mac, PC, Linux, and go into pretty much any major 3D animation and game engine. If you're working in the Unreal crowd or with the Unreal crowd or the Crysis crowd, the FBX is the only file format that you can import in. So it's an important player inside of our industry. The one that I like to promote and use is the Collada file. The Collada guys are on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. This is an open source file format. No one actually owns the core code for all this jazz, okay? It is open, it's free, it's public domain, and that's fantastic. The guys down at Luxology have spent a significant amount of time making sure that their support of the Collada format is extraordinarily robust. In addition to, of course, exporting out all the geometry, the UVs, and the materials, it often grabs some of the material attributes. It also grabs some of the textures. It's a great, great format. The guys at Apple have even kind of jumped into the Collada file format, and if you export this out, you can open up your Collada file in Apple Preview, which is just amazing to me. It's crazy. It's great. I'm a big fan of the Collada format. It's my go-to guy initially. This is the best job of exporting out all the vertex normals, so everything comes in looking absolutely banging. It's awesome. Doesn't need any sort of additional adjustments. It's great. This is my favorite. I always try Collada initially. This is my first choice, and then I start looking at FBX if Collada isn't working inside my app. Now, I bring up these different formats because you're often, when you're exporting from Modo and into another app, you have to test things. This is a moving target. It's not always going to work, right? We're now asking two different software manufacturers with two different development teams and two different core algorithms to talk and work and play together nicely. This is a little bit more of a challenge than one might imagine. Software is an incredibly complex kind of chunk of machinery. So we want to find file formats that give us the path of least resistance. Collada is a great one. Collada is my first, FBX is my second, and if none of those work, if you just can't get your stuff out of Modo and into another app like Unity, then the old tried and true one, this will work. It's an object file, okay? The Wavefront OBJ. This is the oldest file format in our industry. It's one of the original, if not the original, 3D modeling format from the late 80s and early 90s. This is only going to spit out your model and your geometry and your UVs, okay? And your materials. It's not going to bring your textures. It's not going to bring animation or cameras. It's just basically your model, okay? It's the most widely used and widely accepted format out there, mostly because it's the original file format out there. So if you need just your geometry, this is going to work quite well, okay? It's a very simple file format. It doesn't bring a lot of bells and whistles with it. It's called Wavefront because Maya was not actually developed by Autodesk. Maya was built by a company called Wavefront, who was purchased by another company called Alias, and for a majority of my career, Maya was called Alias Wavefront Maya. And then the guys down at Autodesk, being the evil empire that they are, kind of like the Borg, right? They just gobble up, assimilate, right? They assimilated, they gobbled up Maya, and now it's Autodesk Maya. So those are the three that I really recommend. Collada's number one choice, FBX is number two choice, and then OBJ is number three. FYI, if you're working with like Photoshop or other very simple 3D applications, the OBJ file type is the supported file type in Photoshop. Okay, it doesn't understand anything else. Okay, so those are the three that you're going to see the most out there in the real world: Collada, FBX, OBJ. I'm going to be spending all of my time talking about Collada because it's going to give us the most flexibility and a path of least resistance out over into Unity. So I'm going to pick the Collada, and I'm going to do just layers. So just the one layer that I have selected. Let's hit OK. Now it's going to ask me for a name and a destination, and let's just call this Pat's Forge. I'm going to put it right there on my desktop. Okay. So what physically just happened here? If you look very carefully on my desktop over here, there it is. There's my Collada file, patsforge.dae. That's the file extension for this new format. Notice that's not a Luxology project file. It's a DAE, okay? It's absolutely critical that we make a separation between our Luxology project, which is kind of like our master Photoshop document, right? And the exported model, which in many cases is like the flattened Photoshop document that we're going to bring over into Unity, okay? This is kind of cool. I always like showing this. This kind of proves how widespread the Collada format really is. I just double-clicked on my DAE file, and you can see that the preview application on my Mac is opening it up. Now I got some weights, some vertex map weighting going on here. But there it is. You can actually see the model, which is pretty great. Yeah, awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, anyways, let's talk about how we're going to work with Unity. Okay, Unity is a great game app. I love working with Unity. If you go into this week's course page, under the resources section, I didn't link to the actual Unity website. It's unity3d.com. Unity 3D is probably one of the largest game software manufacturers out there in the real world. They have taken over. They used to be a very small game app. Now they're a humongous game engine. Okay. And they're really great. I like working with Unity, and Unity is kind of like they're like kindred spirits, if you will, to Luxology. They have a very similar design style. They have a very similar approach to their software development, and they're all about bringing artists, the best tools and the best technology. I'm a big fan. I find working with Unity very easy. If you're a Mac person like I am, or if you think the way a Mac person thinks, Unity is going to feel very comfortable to you. You can download Unity 3D for free. Okay, there is a pro version that I believe costs $1,500, but you don't necessarily need the pro version to do what we're going to be doing in this class. Actually, you don't really need the pro version for about 95% of your game development pipeline. You really only need the pro version at the very end, when you're optimizing and doing the final tweaks to your levels and to your experiences, and then you'll get access to some really neat technology that will push your game into that world of professionalism. Unity 3D is being used everywhere, and I think specifically it's kind of taken over the mobile market. If you're playing a 3D game on your mobile device, chances are it was made in Unity. In addition, they've also taken over the browser-based world. If you're playing a 3D game in Photoshop, or excuse me, if you're playing a 3D game in Facebook, it was probably more than likely made in Unity. I'd say only within the last maybe year or two have they really started to gain a lot of popularity in the console market. Up until now, the Unreal engine, developed by the guys down at Epic, and the Crysis engine, were really the go-to game engines for the console market. Well, the Unity folks have done a significant amount of development on their high-end rendering technology, and now it's starting to get into the console market in a big way. And as you can see, the next version of Unity is about to drop.
Their free to use model is changing industries a lot.
It really is. Access to the developer tools used to be very limited. And it cost a lot to get access to a game engine. Now it's free, which is phenomenal. And a lot of the other game engines are going that way. They're not just giving people, an SDK that allows you to mod things. They're giving you access to the root engine and the root code so that you can make your own games. The guys down at Unreal have changed their model, in my opinion, in response to the popularity of Unity. All right. I would encourage you to download Unity, start playing around with it. Like everything, the more experience that you have within inside of an application, the stronger you're going to be in that application. There are a couple learning resources that I really want to bring to your attention before we go too much further. Working in Unity is a little bit of a beast. There's a lot going on, and it's very, very complex. We're just going to scratch the surface of the authoring tools inside of Unity in the next couple of weeks. And of course, we're going to pick up right where we left off and start looking at a lot of the really advanced features in the Unity rendering engine in 4.26, which is happening next fall, by the way. So please make sure that you enroll in 4.26 if you want to get the game design certificate. Okay. However, between now and then, can't recommend these two links enough. Unity has created a phenomenal learning portal on their website, and it's great. It's really, really great. They have a lot of content, a lot of tutorials. Almost all of them are video tutorials that are professionally created by industry super nerds that know this stuff better than I do. So I'd absolutely recommend supplementing everything that we've talked about in here with these videos on the website. They've broken them down into a whole series of small little modules, and there's also projects in this tab. If you go to the projects tab, you can actually build entire games, okay? Check it out. These are all the games that you can build, which is pretty cool. And they'll take you from concept all the way through completion, and they're really kind of great. My recommendation is if you're going to be doing this over the summer break, don't do the stealth one. Because they say the difficulty level is beginner. It's totally not beginner. Totally not beginner. It's a hardcore intermediate. Do number 2 and 3 first before you jump into that stealth one. Okay, so there's the Learn site. Can't recommend this enough. In addition, if you want to learn more about the programming inside of Unity, there's a really great website called unity3dstudent.com, and I really, really hope that it's up still. Okay, great. I was worried for a minute that they had taken it down. This has been around forever, and the guy that actually made this site did such a great job of presenting all these ideas that Unity hired him to make their Learn site. So the dude that made this site does all the tutorials on the Learn site, and they're great. They really are phenomenal. I'd say these tutorials on unity3dstudent.com are more geared towards the programmers. They directly kind of tackle some very important concepts and ideas on the interactive programming side. So check it out. Good stuff that'll help you going. Help you get going, okay? All right. So 2 really phenomenal learning resources that I encourage you to take a look at as we start to tackle our time in Unity. With that said, let's jump into it. Let's just start rocking and rolling here and take a look at Unity. We're working in Unity version 4. It's going to be, you can find the executable in your dock. That's what it looks like, kind of the white cube with that really funky black border around it. And let's go ahead and launch it real fast and start talking about how it can work inside of Unity. Unity works on a much different paradigm than Modo. In Unity, we're building an entire game. In Modo, we're building a scene. The folder structure and the media management system of Unity is really, really important. Okay? I'm going to create a new project. This is the project wizard that you're going to see when we first launch. And if you don't see this, just do File, New Project. And I'm going to create a new project. One of the things that we have to initially generate when we're working with Unity is a project directory. This project directory is critical as it's going to store all of our assets, all of our textures, our materials, all of our scripts, basically all the moving elements that our game is going to be accessing to ping all of its stuff. Okay? In addition to all of the assets that we import into the engine, this, let's just do set here. I'm going to put this on my desktop. Call this Pat's Awesome Game. Okay, put it right there on my desktop. Wonderful. Okay. This is a folder, okay? In addition to storing all the assets that we're going to import in, it's also going to access an entire library of scripts and commands and architectures and sub-libraries that's going to allow our game to run, okay? So if you think about it, this folder contains everything, and I mean everything that's required for our game to run. So it's absolutely, if not critical, mission critical, that we understand where this folder is and what we've named it, okay? I mentioned earlier that Unity doesn't pull any punches. If you don't know where this stuff is, I don't know where it is, okay? You have to understand where you're creating this project directory, what it's named, and where you're going to be storing it, okay? All of the assets for your game are going to go in this folder, okay? Now, I would recommend, and I kind of support, that we only include the assets that are going to go into the game in this folder. So you're going to have like two parallel tracks here. You're going to have one project directory, one folder for all of your Luxology stuff, right? And they're going to have another folder that's just for Unity. We're creating the Unity folder right now. Okay. Inside this little wizard, you're also going to get access to a lot of packages. These are basically presets that you can automatically load into your scene file when you create them. And I'm not going to import in all of them here. However, I am going to import in scripts, and I'm going to import in character controllers. So if you're following along, let's import those in. Okay, here we go. If you don't do this, this is absolutely something you can load in after the fact. Now, Unity is a beast. There's a lot of stuff that it's loading on the back end. As you can see, nothing's happened yet, and I'm getting a beach ball, and that's primarily because I'm running a Moto, web streaming this in, trying to run a 3D real-time game image at the exact same time. That's going to be a little bit of a problem. But let's see what we got. It's going to take a little bit to load in all these assets, launch the architecture, and get the game engine up and running. And let's see here. I'm just going to be patient, let it cook. There we go. Now it's importing the assets. And then once all of my assets are loaded, it's going to open up Unity, and we can start getting ready to rock and roll. The interface in Unity is going to feel similar, but there are some unique differences between the layout of the Unity interface and the way we've been working in Moto. Also, navigating around inside of our three-dimensional scene is going to be a little bit different. But I think once you kind of reprogram your brain, start getting into it, it's not going to be that bad. Here we go. Maybe. Just thinking about it. Aha! Okay, so welcome to Unity. Welcome to Unity. If your screen looks a little bit different from what I have on the monitor here, don't freak out. Much like Moto, Unity is a plastic interface, meaning that you can change and move all these palettes around. I've kind of moved these palettes into a format that works for my brain. But you're more than welcome to change this to get a much more comfortable work environment. Okay, let's just give a small little tour of the Unity project or the Unity interface. Up here at the top, in this tab that says Scene, this is our window into our three-dimensional scene. So this is very much like the OpenGL viewport that we're used to manipulating over in Moto. And in many cases, it's identical. Navigating around the interface is very similar. The keyboard shortcuts we'll come back to in a minute. But this is the window, if you will. The scene part is a window into our three-dimensional universe that we're going to create. Okay, down here at the bottom. Now this tab may be someplace else inside your scene. It may actually be right next to your scene tab. I've brought mine down to the bottom here. And you can just drag and drop these tabs wherever you want them to go. The game tab, this is an actual window into what your game is going to look like. The great thing about real-time rendering is that it's all real-time, so what you see is what you get. Awesome. So what you see downstairs in this game tab is a direct representation and visualization of what your game is going to be. At every single moment in Unity, you always get access to what the game is. You don't have to render anything. You don't have to compile anything. You just hit the play button. Boom. Now you're playing your game. Awesome. It's pretty great. Okay. We'll come back to this here in a minute. In the middle here, I have two very important tabs. And I want to start on the bottom one. We have the Project tab, and then above it on my screen, we have the Hierarchy tab. Now, these are really, really important, and we need to understand the differences between the two because they play very unique roles, okay? The Project tab represents all the assets that we've imported into our game. So this is everything. It's a global bin. The assets that are inside of this tab can be used by any level, by any game object, and any item inside of Unity. So it really is, in a sense, a folder, okay? I have some assets already created and imported into the app. These were the ones that I clicked on in that project wizard a moment ago. So here's some scripts that I loaded in. Here's some character controllers. But let's get our stuff in here. Let's import that model that I sent from Modo into the application. Importing items into Unity is really easy. It's extraordinarily easy, actually. As you'd imagine, going to the top of the screen where it says File, or Assets, excuse me, Import New Asset. Okay? Import New Asset. You can also do this exact same thing down in the Project tab. So if you right-click, Import New Asset, it's going to pull up the exact same command. Let's just grab it real fast. It's going to bring open the standard import dialog box. On my desktop, there's a file called Pat's Forge. There it is, the DAE. And let's hit import. It's going to think about it, and there it is. There's the model file. Oops, excuse me. There's the model for Pat's Forge. Now, in addition to importing it on the Forge, notice that it automatically created a new folder called Materials. This is now the home to all those material groups that we created over in Modo. They're not all encompassed on the exact same item as they were over in Unity. So think of the Materials directory kind of like your shader tree. If we expand it, check it out, there are all the material groups that I established over in Modo. Okay? And because I named them all, I can very quickly and very easily reapply all the textures to those material groups here in Unity. Let's talk about the actual prefab that was imported in. Okay? Because look at the icon. There's a little three-dimensional cube with a document icon immediately in the lower right-hand corner of that file. If we expand it, check it out. There's actually a number of things that were created when we imported in this object. Okay? In every sense here, it's generated a whole bunch of components. There are some parents and some child objects inside of this hierarchy. Let's go through them real fast. Of course, at the very top here, we have rough. And if you look at the icon, it's got this groovy little kind of checkerboard. Almost looks like a wireframe, right? Because in every sense, this component it's just the geometry. And there it is in my inspector over here. This is just the geometry. It's just the geometry and just the UV maps. That's all it is, okay? Just the geo and the UVs. Now, this is an avatar. This is automatically created by Unity. This is a Unity-generated item that's purpose-built for animation. The Unity game engine has a phenomenal character animation system called Mechanim inside of it. And this is, allow us to, kind of access that Mechanim architecture through this avatar. We're not going to need this because, I don't want my little house to walk across the screen or anything. So I'm going to delete this here in a minute. And then if we go down two more, you can see that we have this render. Now that is, this is actually part of the shader tree. This is not necessarily something that I want to keep, but it's okay. Okay. If we may have gotten a different result if we imported it in the FBX, but for the most part, this is not going to really do anything, so it's no big problem. This is kind of the render item that was in Modo, and here's the actual item itself. Now, each one of these items plays a very important role. So we have Pat's Forge, and Pat's Forge is actually created by all of these children. Okay, so we have the geometry with the render item, and then this guy down here. This rough item, if we look at the inspector, gives us a much larger idea of what's connected to this item. In Unity, we're working with this idea of a game object that's really constructed from a whole series of components. Okay? Think of the game object like a car. What is a car? Well, it's a whole bunch of components welded together, right? A car is nothing more than an engine, a transmission, some spark plugs, some wheels, a steering wheel. I mean, these are all components when added together create a car, right? Well, we're doing almost the exact same thing here. You can see all of these components over here in the inspector. I'm going to collapse some of them. So here are the components. There's the transform component. There's the mesh filter, the mesh renderer component. Okay, and then we have a whole series of materials. I'm just going to collapse them so we can see them all. A whole series of materials. Those are all of the components that are directly associated with the file that we imported into Unity. If you look carefully at the mesh renderer and mesh filter, these are global components whose information is whose kind of parameters here are being set to the other children inside of our hierarchy. this mesh filter is automatically grabbing the geometry right here to create its object. All right, so our game asset here is nothing more than a whole series of individual pieces that are connected to what's called a game object. The parent of this game object has some global commands that are important for us to kind of toggle and work with as we import it into our scene file. So the topmost element in our hierarchy includes some really important things, and if you look carefully over here, we have a scale factor. We'll come back to this after spring break and talk about the role of the scale factor. We can also swap UV maps. We can generate colliders, which we'll talk about after we come back from our spring break. We can generate some new light mapping UVs. Again, that's something we'll talk about after spring break. So the parent of this entire asset is really important, as it contains a number of important channels and properties that is going to give us ultimately more control on how the game engine is going to work with this asset. For now, I'm going to go into the rig section, and under generic, or under type, I want to do none and then hit apply. This is going to get rid of that animation avatar from my project. There it is, and that's all I really want. That avatar item is gone, and we're just getting the geometry, the render item, and of course the object itself, the item itself. All right. And animations, I don't want to import any of the animations. I always turn that off just to ensure that it's not grabbing any of this stuff before we import it into our scene. Okay. When we're working inside the project tab in Unity, it's important to understand specifically what we are influencing and kind of manipulating, okay? Because it seems magical, but it's really not. At the beginning of our conversation today, I implored you guys to manage this directory, manage your project directory, as it's the most important thing inside of Unity. Let's revisit that project directory and see how it's changed. Because now that we've imported some stuff into our game, it's going to look a little bit different. So if I go back to my desktop, check it out. There's my project directory that I created inside that project wizard, right? Just a folder, that's all it is. But the contents of that folder are really what's important. Let's jump into it real fast. All right. Each one of your project directories is going to include 4 subfolders. All 3 of these folders are absolutely critical. If you delete one, your game's not going to work, okay? So you can't touch these, okay? Especially the temp and the library one. If you start messing around with this, the success of your project is in your hand. There's nothing I can do, okay? If you don't transfer one of these, you're screwed. You have to start over. If you start messing around with it, you're screwed and you have to start over. So don't touch library and don't touch the temp folder. The library, as you would imagine, is the entire Unity architecture in the folder, okay? This is a lot of the back-end stuff in here, so don't mess with it, okay? Don't even go in it. Don't even go in it. And the temp folder is going to include a lot of the temporary files that Unity is creating in this session of Unity. So if you go on and start messing with this stuff, you're going to mess up the game engine over in the current session of Unity. The only folder that you're allowed to go into is the assets folder. Let's explore it here for a second, because you're going to see that there's some things inside of your assets folder that may look a little bit familiar. Look at what's in there. We have patsforge.dae, we have a materials folder, and then we have that standard assets folder. Does this look familiar? Let's go back over to Unity and explore a couple things. There we go. You see some common elements between these two environments? It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Absolutely right, Alan. It is the exact same thing. The assets folder in your project directory represents the project tab in Unity. So what we have in the project tab is going to show up in our assets directory. Okay? I bring this up because we can use this assets folder in our project directory intelligently. I need to import in a whole bunch of textures. Okay? I could go through the exact same import asset feature that I went through earlier to bring in my model file, Or I can jump over into my Finder and navigate to the location of my project directory and start dumping textures in there. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Jump back over into the Finder window. I'm going to create a new Finder window here, and I'm just going to take this new guy. I'm going to go find some textures. And I'll just do a couple here. I'm just going to drag this texture file over into my assets folder, Pat. There we go. Let's just double click on it. And let's go grab, I think I have some plaster in here too. Or not. Let's just go to tileable. Wall tile. Oh, that's not it. Sorry, excuse me. Tileable. Let's find a one in here that will work. That'll work. Grab that, throw that into my assets folder. And I want to copy that. I don't want to move it, I want to copy it. Find another one in here. I don't know why I'm being so selective, but I am. I'm going to copy this file into my assets directory. And now, check it out, when I go back into Unity, watch what's going to happen. It's going to import all those assets into the game engine, and I can access them and apply them to all of my materials that I've created in the application. Okay? So we have a live link between what we see in our Projects tab and what shows up in that Assets folder. If you delete something in your Assets folder, what's going to happen over in here? Bye-bye. Absolutely. This is a live link. We're accessing the exact same location inside of your computer. Okay? Be careful with this. Be careful. It's a tremendous advantage because now we can import things quickly and delete things and continue to manage our media in our very comfortable Finder environment. But there's also some landmines that will blow up in your face if you're not being careful with what you do. Okay. You're going to be working with a tremendous amount of individual assets in Unity. So it's important that we continue to organize all of this stuff inside of our project tab. This project tab at the top left-hand corner has a lovely pull-down menu that allows you to create a number of different things. And you can see that there's a lot of stuff that we can build and create inside of Unity. I think the most simple one is going to be a folder. I'm going to call this textures. There we go. And as you'd imagine, I'm going to place all of my textures in that folder just to keep things a little bit more organized. I'm also going to create another folder, and I'm going to call this game objects. So let's call objects. This folder is going to be where all of my, as you'd imagine, all of my models are going to go. There it is. Okay. Notice that I didn't put models. We're no longer working with models here in Unity. We're working with game objects. As I mentioned at the beginning of the class today, we can no longer mess around with verts, edges, and polys. We're not modeling anymore. The modeling of this thing is done. We're working with game objects. So it's critical that we start to kind of change the way our brain approaches all of these files in Unity. So here's my model. All right. Inside the model, though, if we take a look at this level of our hierarchy, you can see that the item from Moto has a whole bunch of associated materials. Okay. Now these materials are actually links to the content that's in here. What Unity has at its core is a system where we can have multiple game objects accessing the exact same materials, which is great because now I can use the chimney material on any game object within inside of my environment. Makes it great, especially if we're recycling materials inside of our scene. The more materials we have, the more information the computer is going to have to manage for us. This makes it kind of simplifies the entire system. We've separated out the materials from the game objects, and we can apply the one material to as many different game objects as we want. It's fantastic. But let's populate some of these some of these materials with some textures. And I'm going to start with the wood. This should be all the wood beams. So if I open up my textures folder, there it is. There's the image that I want to work with. Okay, and let's just go back to the material for a second. For a couple this week, and I think next week I'll talk about how we can work with all the bump maps that we've been creating. But for this week, we're just going to keep it simple. The default material type inside of Unity is the diffuse material. If you start to explore that shader pull-down list, you're going to see that we have access to a lot of really, really neat, awesome shaders, okay, that will allow us to create the illusion of glass and metal and include those bump maps that we've been making. But for today, we're just going to work with the diffuse shader. The diffuse shader comes with a number of different parameters that we can change. Of course, we can change the main color. Its default is kind of this middle gray. And then we can also load in a tiling texture, or any texture map for that matter, into this image well. And that's what I'm going to do. So with my material selected, I'm just going to simply left click and drag my tiling texture into that image well and let go. You see it shows up on the little sphere downstairs. Awesome. Let's do the same thing for the walls. I'll use this plaster. Just drag it up in there. Awesome. And the chimney, I'll put this stone wall tile thing on. All right. Well, since my model is loading in all of these materials into this game object, check it out. If I click on it now, aha, downstairs in the little preview window, I'm getting a much better understanding of how these materials are being applied to our model. Rock and roll. Things are looking good. I'm digging it. All right. So now it's probably a good time to start saving things. Okay. We have two different hierarchies that we need to save within. Do we have a game yet? No, we don't have anything, right? We just have a project with some assets imported into it. We do, however, need to save our game. Here's what I want you to start thinking in your mind. Your project equals your game. Okay? Your Unity project file equals all of the assets for the entirety of your game. Okay? So let's save our project. And that's going to save the contents of our project tab. So File, where is it? Save Project, right there. Save Project. However, if our project represents our game, what represents a level within that game? Has anyone discovered it yet? The scene, absolutely. Okay. So let's create our first scene file. It's really super easy. Just do File, New Scene. Okay, New Scene, and check it out. It's going to give us an option as soon as it makes it. Oh, it's already created, but I don't like how Unity does this. You have to save your scene. Let's save it. Let's give it a name. Once you name it, then it will show up in your project. Let's call this level 1, and look where it wants to put it. Yeah, it automatically wants to save everything that you create in Unity into that assets folder that exists inside your project directory, right? That assets folder is the central hub for everything in Unity. Let's hit save, and then once we hit save, there it is, boom. Check it out, it shows up in your project. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there much difference between Unity for a Mac and Unity for a PC?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. They're entirely cross-platform. Now that we have a scene file, check out our assets directory inside of our project folder. There it is. .unity is the extension for one of your levels, okay? It's important that we have these Unity files, okay? If you don't, you're not going to have anything to play. All right, let's go back over here. Now that we have one kind of additional kind of reinforcer that you have in fact have a scene file is look at the name bar at the top of your application window. It kind of goes from the most specific to the most general description of this environment. We're playing right now. We are working inside of level 01.unity, right? Awesome. And then that level exists within inside of Pat's Awesome Game, which is the name of the project directory that I created at the beginning of this session. And I'm also building this game for PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. Awesome. I know, I worked real hard at that. Okay. So let's make something. Now that we have all of these elements created, and we've imported some assets, we've saved our project, we've created and saved our scene, let's make something, because I don't have anything for me to play around with right now. It's just an empty environment. Unity allows us to generate a number of different things in application. I want to create a very simple ground plane for my character and for me to kind of chill on, okay? We don't always have to create everything over in Modo. There are a number of game objects that we can create, okay? Remember, we are now in the game object world. That's the item version of what we're used to seeing over in Modo. So we had items in Modo. Well, that equals game objects here inside of in Unity. Let's go to create other. Boom. And let's just create a plane. You can see there's a lot of things that we can create in here. Let's just create a plane. And it's going to place that plane at the origin of our scene. Or let me just make sure actually I didn't place it at the origin. This always drives me crazy. You can see over in the inspector here, the transform component that's associated with our plane tells me the exact location of this object. Let's just zero it out. 0, put it right smack dab in the origin of our scene. And there it is. It's just chilling over there. Let's hit the F key to fit. Okay? So another big kind of, or an important keyboard shortcut that you want to write down. The F key is going to fit the selected game object into your OpenGL viewport up top, into your scene window, the F key. Now that we have an object, check it out. You can actually start to see the computer say, hey, I have a game now. I have something to draw. So it's drawing it in real time as I'm creating all this stuff in Unity. All right, let's make this a little bit bigger. At the top here, we can move some things around. We can rotate. We can scale. Let's just scale this thing up. Make it nice and big. I'll zoom out a little bit. And let's start talking about how we can navigate around our OpenGL window. The navigation keyboard shortcuts in Unity, unfortunately, are different. I wish they were all identical to what we had over in Modo, but they are very, very different, but they're still pretty easy to manage, okay? And it always takes me a second to remember all of them. Yeah, okay. So if you hold down the Option key or the Alt key in a PC, your left mouse button is going to allow you to orbit. It's going to allow you to rotate around. Left mouse button. The middle mouse button and Alt key is going to allow you to do your pan. And then Alt right mouse button is going to allow you to zoom in and zoom out. So it's Alt, left, middle, and right. The Alt key or the Option key here on the Mac is going to be the one consistent element between all three of those keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so it's just the Alt key and left, middle, and right mouse button. Okay, we also have a cool little compass over here. Okay, this compass is going to allow us to zip around into a number of orthographic viewports. However, this is not like changing our scene to look from the top or the right or the left, kind of like what we were able to do inside of Modo. It doesn't actually change it into an orthographic view. It keeps it inside of this perspective environment. It just kind of like zips it over to the top. So we can see our scene from a number of angles. And the center one is kind of home. There we go. Or excuse me, the center one changes it from perspective to an isometric. The isometric view type is going to remove all perspective within the scene, and it's going to kind of flatten everything out. Okay, cool. So let's get our model in here. We have a little ground plane that we need to work with. Let's get my forge in there because I want to see my building inside my scene. Earlier, I mentioned that Unity and the Mac operating system are kind of kindred spirits. The Mac operating system, we're used to dragging and dropping things, and that architecture is available to us here in Unity. I think prototyping and very quickly fleshing out the details of your three-dimensional level in Unity is easy and fast. It's great. There's two ways I can import in my forge into my scene. Let's go find my object. There it is. There's my little forge. I can just drag it from my project tab up into my hierarchy, and then boom, you can see that it automatically jumps in. Let me zoom in. All of my textures are there. Awesome. Rock and roll. I have some tiling that I need to get to kind of manage on those textures, but I can do that in here in a minute. Okay? So dragging up is a great and easy way of importing your asset into your three-dimensional scene.
Is palette information not important in Modo?
It's not. We'll have to do it manually. We'll come back to that in here in a minute. So the other way, let me hit undo for a second here. The other way is actually really kind of fun. We can just grab the object, and now we can drag and drop it and place it wherever we want within inside of our scene. It's doing a really quick collision calculation on that ground plane, and it's trying to place that object wherever we want inside of my three-dimensional scene. This is fantastic because now we can very quickly place things inside of our game level without having to, wonder if it's all lining up. Just a fast way of getting things in. Yeah. Yep. All right. Now, up in my hierarchy, the hierarchy is that second tab that's really important. The project tab represents all the assets that are currently in our game. The hierarchy is the opposite of that. The hierarchy represents all of the assets that are currently in our level. Okay? This is just what's in our level. Nothing more. So inside this level, we have our main camera, which is the default. Every level gets created with a main camera. We have my forge, and then that two-dimensional plane that I created a moment ago. And things are looking pretty cool. However, what we see is what we get, right? Look down here in our game window. What don't we see down there? Lighting. Let's add a light. Okay? We've got to add some lights in now. Where am I going to go to add something in Unity? You could go to Create, but I don't think I see, I don't see a light in here. Game object, absolutely. Everything's a game object now. And under the Create Other pull-down menu, you can see that we have 3 or 4 light types that we get to work with. I'm just going to use the directional light because this is going to be an exterior. Let's add it in. Boom, there it is. Okay. Let's look at what's been created. Over in our hierarchy, which as we know represents all the assets that are currently in my level, you can see the directional light. It's automatically selected, so the inspector on the far right hand of our interface is going to show me all the properties that are directed towards this specific light. I can see its location, its rotation parameter. I can change the color. I can even change the type of our light. And of course, the brightness. I want to do this. Check this out. I want to go from no shadows to hard shadows. We get one, or hold on a sec. Maybe you want to hit play. Does it draw them? Nope. We'll come back to that, the shadows earlier or later. Oh, you know what? This is my fault. I don't have the most recent version of Unity on here. You can change it to hard shadows and you'll actually get a real-time light. You get one real-time light with the free version of Unity. If you want more than one real-time light that creates real-time shadows, you have to buy the Pro version. I got to upgrade. I knew I was forgetting to do something today. I don't have the most recent version of Unity. Okay, so I got a light. I got an object. I got my little ground plane. But I want to be able to cruise around my environment and check out my scene from a number of different perspectives. In order to do this, we have to access a very important game object inside of Unity, and it's called a game controller. This game controller physically represents what the gamer is going to interface with to manipulate our game. If you import it in, like I did, all of those game object presets at the beginning of the scene, or beginning of the session today, under standard assets, check it out, we have some character controller prefabs that I imported in when I created my scene. I'm just going to grab the first person controller prefab and drag it into my environment. And you can see that I get a little capsule. that capsule represents my game controller. And right now, it's kind of on in between the surface of my environment and the floor, or the floor. So I'm just going to hit the move tool, drag it up some so it's above that plane. Awesome. And now let's give it a go. Let's play my game. I got a game controller in there. So these buttons at the top of the screen now become more important. We have play and pause. Okay? In order to play our game, obviously you hit the play button. In order to stop playing our game, hit the play button again and it'll stop it. We can pause the simulation to make changes and updates to some parameters. Let's just go ahead and do it real fast. Let's play it. I have totally forgotten what the last one does. Let's just see what the tooltip. I never use it. Yeah, I really don't know. Let's just play our game and check it out. Oh, I'm just using my mouse and the ASWD keys, and I can cruise around my house. Now look what's happening at the top part of my scene. This is a live, real-time simulation. So as I manipulate all the keys on my keyboard, you can see the little capsule on the top part of my interface cruising around my house. So you get a real-time feedback as to precisely what's being activated and triggered inside of my game. Dun, 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 dun. Awesome. This is cool. This is cool. However, I have a little bit of a problem, don't I? I'm a little bit too big, aren't I? Okay? Or actually, the way we need to approach this is my house, a little bit too small. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so if you fall off the edge of the universe, which is going to happen, check it out. I'm just going to go kill myself. Metaphorically in the game. Wah! There it goes. And what's going to stop me from falling? Nothing. Nothing's going to stop me from falling. Welcome to game development. You don't get anything for free here, okay? We have to build everything. We have to build death zones and triggers and scripts that are going to drive certain actions within the game. So without any of that stuff in here, we just got to stop the game. So I want to go back to my play button at the top of my screen. Just hit the play button. It will reset the game, stop the simulation, and put all of the pieces back to their original state. So let's solve our problem. Now, we need to be very, very careful here in that we can never really change the size of our first-person controller prefab. That's it. It's locked. Don't change the scale of it. This first-person controller prefab, as you can see, is really constructed from a number of different components, including some scripts that drive the run distance, the walk speed, how far you jump, a lot of different parameters. A lot of those channels are dependent on the size of that little capsule. So if you go messing around with that size, you're going to be running really slow or really fast, depending on which way you scale it. Don't mess around with it. Everything gets scaled to the size of our first-person controller prefab, not the opposite. So I'm going to go in and just grab my forge here, and I'm just going to scale it up. Scale it up till I'm pretty happy with it. Let's just see, like that. Yeah, let's play our game now. And, all right, here we go. Haha, now the door is probably still a little bit too small, but I'm in the ballpark. At least now it's not a tiny house. All right, rock and roll. A good keyboard shortcut to jot down and to remember is Command P. P is in play. Command P is going to start and end the simulation, so it's the exact same thing as hitting that gigantic play button at the top of our screen. Yeah? Cool. All right. We have a little bit of a problem, though, don't we? If you look very carefully at our OpenGL window here, some of these textures are not exactly lined up. Let's make some corrections here. I need to go in and fix the stone texture that's being wrapped around my chimney, as do I need to change all of the wood grain, all the wood textures on my beams. Well, this is the kind of the cool thing about working inside of Unity. It's a live environment. Anytime we make a change to any of the components that are associated with this game object, they're going to update. It allows us to go through a much faster iterative design process than other game engines on the market. Let's just check it out real fast. I'll focus my attention on the chimney. I need to change the tiling size of this material. So let's go find it. Here's chimney, and this is what we need to change, the tiling. This is the exact same value as that horizontal and vertical wrap channel we were working with over in Modo. Exact same information. So really what we should do is that we should extract that, either jot it down, remember it, or just kind of do it freehand, and apply those values to the channel boxes inside of Unity. I'm just going to freehand it. Let's just do 3 by 3. Yeah, and you can see that the texture is now tiling more often within the exact same space. Let's do 5 by 5. Cool. And then it updates immediately. Let's do the same thing for the wood texture. Let's go find a representative sample. And let's do 3 by 3. Hey, that's looking better. Okay. And my plaster, I think I'll stay generally as is. So this is a live environment. Anytime we make a change to any of the components that are associated with this project file, it's going to update inside of the scene window up top there. Okay. Questions so far? Yes.
Okay, it's not showing up on the live. It shows color, but it doesn't show the texture.
It shows color, but it doesn't show texture.
I've assigned them all,
Uh-huh.
and it's solid color rather than
Solid color. Interesting. I don't know. Let's go in and take a look at some things here. Now, up here, does it look correct?
No, it still has.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to reprogram your brain. Let's see if we can figure out what's happening here. Okay, so process of elimination. Let's go through. Well, the first thing that we need to look at is your project from Modo. Okay, I'm going to guess this is a UV map issue because the materials are making the connection, but the textures aren't being applied. So look, go back over to Modo. Let's check out your project file on Modo real fast. And yep, there it is. You have more than one UV map on that item.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Alexander just ran into an issue that is really critically important, and I can't understate this enough. Each item is only allowed to have one UV map. Her textures weren't showing up because she had more than one UV map on her model. Okay? So really, really focus on that before you export from Modo. Okay. All right. One thing about I don't have textures, image maps for all these for the rest of the materials. So you absolutely and can and should go in and just change the main color. If you click on that main color swatch, you'll get a color picker, and you can choose. You know, if you want to just have everything be kind of flat shaded, you can do that too. So you can have fun with it. Pretty neat. It will tint it. It will tint it. Yeah, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's go into the walls. Right now, this is the main color. If I make it red, you can see that it's tinting that guy. If it's white, it'll retain the original color of the texture. White or shades of gray, depending on how you want to work. One thing, and I forgot to mention this before, and I apologize. If you hold down your right mouse button and do the ASWD keys, you can kind of fly around your scene. I know some people like doing this. I think in certain situations it's helpful. And I'm just holding my right mouse button down, and I'm flying around. You can fly into my house. Check it out. In certain situations, that's kind of cool. And then it's just going to use the mouse look on your mouse cursor to generate its target. Okay, questions so far. Okay, let's take a break. I've been yakking for over an hour. Let's just take a break. Hey, Minka or Vladik, would you mind putting the doorstop in? It's getting a little warm in here. Okay, so before we left for our break, this is kind of where we were in the current production of our scene, just very simply created, little blacks in the shop, just chilling at the origin of our scene. Let's play our game and see precisely where we're at, because there's a couple small minor issues that we need to resolve, okay? Of course, I got a lot of texturing work that I still need to do, but yeah, I got a little bit of a problem here in that I can run through the walls of my house. Okay, now I don't necessarily want to run through the walls of my house, so I need to generate what's called a collider before I go too much further. Now, we're going to have an entire conversation after spring break about colliders, but initially I want to show you how to take the default geometry in Unity and generate what's called a mesh collider. This is the most expensive as far as optimization and performance goes, the most expensive collider there is inside of Unity. It's going to generate basically an invisible wall along every single polygon on your mesh. Let's just check it out. Command P to stop the sim, and let's make it. Okay, I'm going to go find my object inside of my project directory. Here's the forge. Now I'm going to select the parent of the object, and under the model section, check it out. Under the model section, we have this generate colliders option. I'm going to check that on. Now we're not done yet. The piece that almost everyone forgets is the gigantic apply button at the bottom of this window. It's this thing. We have to confirm the creation of all of these colliders by hitting this button. So let's just do it. Hit apply. It's going to think about it for a second. And let's see what's changed on our project. Now, did it ripple update in here? Let's see. It did. It did. So let's do it real fast. Let's play our game. And now, thunk. Yep. Now I can't walk through my walls. Bunk. So you got to turn on that mesh collider. Bunk. Bunk. Now it's impossible for me to go in on the interior of my building. In essence, what I've created here, and I mentioned this before, is an invisible wall along every single polygon on this object. After spring break, I'm going to show you guys a great optimization trick that allows us to only generate collision information along the polygons we know our player is going to interact with, because I'm just going to go out on a limb and guess that my player isn't really going to interact with the top of my chimney. I don't need to be wasting a lot of performance on generating collision events on the top of my chimney. Custom mesh colliders allows us to continue to refine which portions of our scene collision information is going to be generated along. We'll talk about that after spring break. But for now, just turn on generate colliders on the game object, this guy right here. There it is, generate colliders. Boop, just turn that on. All right, and then hit apply. Got to hit apply. All right. My environment right now is pretty basic. It's pretty boring. It's really not that fun or interesting, so I need to go in and create an environment. Part of your homework this week is to generate a terrain in Unity. Now, this terrain isn't going to be something that we model over in Modo. We want to take advantage of the terrain engine in Unity for performance purposes, because if we're working in, like, take example, Skyrim. Skyrim is just amazing to me. The technology that was used to generate that environment is truly stunning. Okay, the models are beautiful, the environments are gorgeous, but the level of detail that they're able to draw in real time is staggering. That's all game engine stuff. We want to kind of tap into that exact same engine, if you will, or, well, it's not the exact same engine, but the exact same concept here in Unity. We're going to generate all of our terrains in Unity. So let's make one initially. I'm going to get rid of my plane. Don't need this name thing, so I'm going to right-click, choose Delete. All right, and at the top of our window here, you can see we have a button called Terrain, and I want to choose Create Terrain. Now, the moment you click on it, you can see the terrain is automatically entered into your environment like that, okay? It's humongous. It's quite big. Yeah? You don't have that, and I don't have the most recent version of Unity, so it might be under Game Object. Create Other, and then Terrain. Yeah, so in this version of Unity, it's under Game Object, Create Other, Terrain. I'll update my Unity over the spring break so we're all on the same page. As you can see, though, Check it out. You can just barely see the little red roof of my forge chilling in the bottom right-hand corner or bottom left-hand corner of my scene. My terrain is massive. It's humongous. So I want to make this a little bit smaller because it's just too big. It's just way too big for the moment. So let's check out some options here that will allow us to change the size of our terrain. Now the knee-jerk reaction is to, I'll just scale it down, just make it smaller. Well, is anything changing? No, okay? So the scale command, not going to work. We have to go into our terrain options here. And if we go set resolution, these are the terrain options. They may look a little bit different on your version, but the terrain width and the terrain length are just going to drive the size of your cube. Put mine to 2. Oops, this is at 600 and 200. Your terrain height is going to be something different. We'll talk about this in a minute. So we'll set the resolution, boom, and you can see now we're talking about it. Now it's much, much smaller. Okay, so maybe it's a little too small. Set resolution, let's put it at 500, oops, 500 by 500. This is something that you want to do before you really start going in and messing around with your terrain and sculpting your environment. The cool thing about working with the terrains in Unity is that it comes with some really fantastic tools. Check it out. Over in your inspector, we have a whole bunch of scripts, and don't be kind of misled by this. These are actually tools that will allow us to interactively create our terrains using some brushes. So we can pull up some mountains here. Here's a whole series of brushes that we can maybe use to generate some organic detail. The brush size will change the size of our brush. And start left-clicking and dragging. Here, I'll use the soft brush so we get a little bit more immediate response. Hello. Oh, the opacity is going to drive the intensity. There we go. So we can just kind of sculpt our own environment. I want to turn off my directional light. Oh, that ruined it. Never mind. If I remember correctly, yeah. This icon right here in your scene preview will kind of disable your light from being drawn just up here. You can see that it's still on down here. And now it's a little bit easier for me to see all the sculpting detail that I'm working with. All right, let's go back to my terrain, grab my brush, and I can very easily just kind of flush out some stuff here. Awesome. Looking good. You can see that this is an additive process. So if I just hover my mouse, it's just going to make a gigantic peak. So keep that in mind. If I hold down the Shift key, it's going to smooth everything out. There we go. So left mouse button is going to pull out. Shift key is going to push down. We can also do the paint height, which now has a height value associated with this. Now, so if you want to make like a cliff that plateaus at a certain height, you can put that value there to the height that you want to stop at, and let's see, it'll just eventually, once it gets to that height, it'll just stop, and let's put it at something much smaller. Let's put it at like, I don't know, 10. And now, once it reaches, once it reaches 10 pixels, it's just going to stop its height. Great way for making plateaus or a stair-step type thing. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you say that again? We're going to get to that in a minute. Yeah, but yes, the answer is yes. We can paint textures on our environments too. Pretty cool. I like it. Same thing, if you want to bring this back down. Brush size. The opacity is always going to drive the strength. So let's go back to the other one. Hold down Shift, and I'll bring this back down. Now, one of the things that we have kind of an issue on right now, and this is smooth, by the way, the little water drop icon is going to smooth everything out and just kind of normalize and average all the heights and stuff. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to the first tool here, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key. And you can see that it's zeroing out a lot of this stuff, but what isn't it doing? Yeah, it's not making a canyon. It's not making, maybe I want to have like a riverbed go through my entire terrain here. It's not going to lower past the minimum height of my terrain, okay? I want to create a gigantic crevasse in my environment here. Well, I can't do that initially. Check it out. We got to go back to our terrain options, okay? And here's the thing, we got to flatten our height map, and a lot of folks don't want to do this. And this height is going to determine kind of the floor of our environment. So you want to do this kind of initially. Let's put this at 100. And if you looked very carefully, you notice that your entire terrain kind of popped up 100 units. Now, with our terrain tools, check it out. Or hold down Shift. I can go below and create kind of carved out areas inside of our terrains. Okay? So as a small reminder, do flatten height map initially. That way you can create a minimum height, a floor level, and then you can use the Shift key and dig down in. Left mouse button will pull up, the Shift key will pull down. You got it. And now you can just very quickly go in, add a lot of really fantastic detail, and you're on your way. Okay, so these three buttons here are the terrain sculpting tools. This one here will allow us to use textures and interactively paint where we want texture detail to go just on our terrains. Okay. Now before we get started, we got to import some textures that we want to paint with. I think let's do this. Did I import any of these things in? No, there's actually a package that comes with Unity. I'm going to go import package. These are all the default kind of packages that come with Unity. And I believe there's one in here called terrain assets. Yep, there it is right there. Let's do that. It's going to import the package in. You'll get this little popover asking you which parts of this package do we want to use. I'm just going to leave everything enabled and hit import. It's going to import all these textures in. There's some textures, there's some models of some trees in here. Okay. And now all that stuff has been placed inside of my standard assets folder, and there it is. We have some grass, we have some textures, rock and roll. Okay. If I go back to my terrain, I can grab the paintbrush now, and I can start painting. But before we go any further, I need to have some textures to paint with. We've imported them in, but we haven't kind of filtered them into this tool yet. So we got to go Edit Textures and add a texture in. It's going to bring open what's called, or it's going to give you this window, and then if you hit the Select button, it's going to open up what's called the Asset Browser, and it's going to navigate and automatically find all the two-dimensional images inside of your project directory. And let's just use, Good Dirt. Great name. I have no idea, and hit Add. Now the first texture that you add is going to tile across the entirety of our scene, so we don't get a lot of control over the first one. Okay. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at what we have. Shoot, I'm even going to play, well, wait, hold on a sec. That's some good dirt, let me tell you. Let me go grab my first-person controller prefab, and I'm going to move it up so that it's just kind of sitting on top of my terrain here. There we go. Let's play our game. Boom, awesome. So now I'm walking around the environment, and specifically what I'm looking at here is I want to make sure that the detail of the actual dirt in the picture kind of matches the size of our environment, and I think I'm pretty close, so I'm happy with that. Stop the game. And now I'll go back to my terrain, and I'm going to load in another texture so I can start painting like grass and rocks and things like that in. So do Edit Textures once more. I'll add it in. Hit the under, this is just an image. Well, you can drag and drop if you like. I'm going to use Select, and I'll do this grassy hill texture. Close it out, hit Add. And now I can use a brush to define where I want grass. So there's my little first-person controller prefab. Let's select this image. The brush size is going to determine the brush diameter. Now I can just paint. Now that doesn't look so hot, so I want to hit undo, and I want to choose maybe one of these other brushes to get a little bit more organic detail. Because we don't want it to be one solid color. We want to mix and match. Also, lowering and increasing the opacity is a fantastic way of kind of feathering things out. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Let's play it, see what we get. Let's walk around our scene for a second here. And we can start to layer these in. Yeah, nice transition between the grass and the dirt. Awesome. Let's go add another one into the mix. edit textures, add texture. And let's see, let's use grass rock. That'll work. Let's add that into our library. I'll select it here. And shoot, I'll grab a different brush this time. And maybe I'll just stamp it down, make my brush a little bit smaller. I'll increase my opacity. And I can start layering. Yeah. Good textures and good environments are really the product of a number of different images all kind of blended together to create a more realistic environment.
Is it possible to randomize the brush?
No. No, it's a pretty basic tool set. It's pretty basic, so there's no jitter. Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things they added in version 4 of the terrain editing engine. If you look carefully here, there's a place for a diffuse image and a corresponding normal map, which is awesome. We'll talk more about that after spring break. Today is just all about the basics. All right. I want to put my forge back in here. Oops. So I can just barely see my little first-person controller prefab just chilling down there. I'm gonna go grab my forge. And you know what? I think I'll just delete it and then I'll re-import it just so I don't have to drag and drop it from the other side of the universe. Just gonna put it right in there. Awesome. Looking good. Wonderful. Playing my game. Ta-da! Awesome. Of course, it's tiny. I need to make it bigger, but that's okay. All right. The last thing that we want to take a look at inside of our terrain is the ability to place trees, because we want to be able to populate our environment with trees and bushes and rocks and detail meshes that really kind of flesh out the realism of our environment. That's what these two brushes do. This first one will allow us to paint down some trees. Like our images for our terrain, we're going to load in a tree. So we'll add tree, and now we'll get this little popover. It's looking for a game object, so it's actually looking for a piece of geometry. This little target will open up your asset browser, and the terrain asset package I was working with before came with one, so I'll select my palm tree. Okay, there it is. You can also drag and drop it in there, and we'll hit add. Now, with our brush, check it out. I'm going to change my brush size quite significantly. Now with my brush, I can paint in some trees. Now with this brush, you do get some randomization that makes it really kind of neat. So we can randomize the color variation, the height. Let's add a lot of variation, the width. And I can create kind of instant forests that look a little bit different. Let's play it now. Yeah, awesome. Now, initially, you won't be able to, you'll be able to walk through the trees, but that's okay. That's all right. We'll talk about how to generate colliders for these guys after spring break. For a first time out, I don't want to overload you guys with problems and issues, because I know that this is some new technology and it's often quite complex.
You mentioned that you can't randomize the brushes, but can you rotate manually?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's a pretty rudimentary system. It's okay. Let's just put it that way. The terrain engine in Unity is okay. I was honestly really hoping that they would rewrite it in version 5, because it's starting to show its age. You know, 2 or 3 versions ago, it was a good terrain engine. Now the competitors have something better. Yeah?
The grass is, it's all 2D. There would actually like 2, 3D grass, like
Let's check it out. Yeah, the answer is yes. And that goes into the detail mesh. That's that last brush inside of our terrain tools, okay? So this one's trees, this one's grass. So same process. We have to go grab a model, add grass texture. Oops, excuse me. Oops, excuse me, hit the wrong button. And inside of this popover, click the little target to open up your asset browser. And here it is. Here's the, we have grass and grass too. Let's just do this one. We'll hit add. Okay, and now don't go crazy with this. Okay, this is a killer. Because now I can go in paint some grass. Yeah. This grass is usually the thing that's going to kill your performance, but it's pretty neat. Check it out. Grass actually waves back and forth. Maybe a little too intense at the moment. There's some additional parameters for grass that allow you to change its variation and its color, but you can. You can. It's only good as the model that you import in, and this default model is not particularly great. Yeah. So, but you can do it. Better than nothing, I suppose. The grass is bigger than my house. I gotta fix that. Do I got a tree coming out of my house? Yeah. Yeah, you got to be careful. You really can't control the placement of your trees on like a per tree basis. So got to be careful. Now, if you wanted to go in and delete a tree, you can do that as well. Let's do that because clearly I don't want to have a tree coming out of my house. Let's go back to my terrain, back to my tree tool, and then let's make my brush size a little bit smaller. And if you hold down the shift key, it'll subtract all the trees. So now I've created this cool little environment immediately surrounding my house. Life is good. Same goes with the grass. Holding down the shift key when you're in the grass tool will subtract it. Yeah.
So, is it just forward, back, left, and right, and mouse control that the default player, what do you call that? The object, default player object controller, default controller?
Yeah, player controller. Yeah, absolutely. I believe you might be able to use the arrow too. Let's see. Space bar is going to jump. Yeah, the arrow keys will move your guy around too. With this controller, with the default controller, that's all the functionality you really get. So this is just the starting point. This is just the initial building blocks. This doesn't in any sense represent the total feature set and what you're able to do with Unity. These are just the day one stuff. If you want additional functionality on your game controller, you're going to have to build that.
Okay.
Can you use sprites for non-hero trees like in the background?
Yeah, actually, it does that automatically for you. Yeah, let's see if we can find a representative sample here that illustrates that. Okay, let's see. With the palm trees, it's kind of difficult. I don't think I have enough palm trees for my draw distance. I'm looking at the trees way out at the border. Here, you know what I can do? If you go back into your terrain tools, the last command here, this is all your settings. And let's do this. Let's do detailed distance. We'll do it much, much smaller. Or excuse me, billboard start. Hey, I hit undo, my bad. Let's do billboard start at a much smaller value. And now, let's see. Or we need to be a much higher value. Right now, the billboard is going to happen. See, these are all two-dimensional trees right now. And then as I get closer and closer and closer to one of those trees, it'll transform into a three-dimensional tree. You can see them doing it in the background. See how they're kind of clicking in and out? From a distance, they're at 690 pixels away from my gamer object. It's going to be a two-dimensional tree. Then as I get closer to it, it flips into a three-dimensional tree, and you can kind of see the border ones flipping in and out. Let's see, yeah. So it's trying to do them automatically for you. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Questions, other questions?
One question. Everything has to be quads. Absolutely everything.
Quads or triangles?
Okay. That was the question.
Quads or triangles? Quads are always what we're after initially.
But if you have triangles, it's
Not the end of the world, yeah. Because everything ultimately gets transformed into a triangle over here in Unity. If you look at the actual model file in your project directory, check it out. I'm going to go look at the actual geometry. Look, it's all triangles. It triangulates everything upon import. So everything eventually is going to get transformed into triangles. Okay. Quads give us the most flexibility going forward. At times, we'll want to triangulate things to get the best result. But I've had a pretty good success rate with the triangulation algorithm here in Unity. So that's the basics. That's the basics of working with Unity. That's about as far as I want you guys to go for this week's homework. Your mission over the next 2 weeks, basically, is to import in your blacksmith shop, get it done if you haven't gotten it done yet, and import it into Unity and create a terrain with some trees and some grass, kind of like the stuff that we showed today. Okay? Free version of Unity, you got it. Yeah, you can do 100% of this with the free version. Just so you guys are aware, the free version of Unity has this light gray interface. The pro version of Unity has a dark gray. So if you're watching a video or you're seeing a tutorial online or what have you, and you see a dark gray interface, that's the pro version. But everything that I've did, as you can see, I'm in the free version here. I don't have the pro version. Because I don't need it for 95% of what I do. Okay, let's kind of talk about what we're going to be accomplishing in this week's homework in the lab, because there's 2 things that we need to strive to hit this week. Of course, the blacksmith shop. This is the blacksmith environment shop. Your mission is to export your model along with all of its corresponding UV maps and materials, import them into Unity, reconnect all the textures to the materials, and create a terrain that includes your blacksmith shop. Okay? That's the mission. That's the mission over the next 2 weeks. Okay? Also, you need to include your water wheel, all the props that you've made, everything that you've constructed for your blacksmith shop should be in this one Unity level. Okay? Questions? Yeah. Nope. Not for this first one. Yeah.
When you were doing the train, speaking of it looks subdivided or something.
Yeah, that's actually, I forgot to mention that. A lot of folks, they get kind of freaked out.
Does it have like a really high color grade?
Kind of. It's doing kind of an adaptive level of detail switch on the fly. There's some really interesting things happening with the terrain. So if you look at it from kind of this perspective, a lot of folks go, oh, is that what it's going to look like? It's all like chunky and blocky and not really great. But then you start zooming in on it, and it starts to smooth out. So it's going to tessellate kind of on the fly, and it's going to add more geometry in the areas that you're currently playing in.
I thought that there were like some water assets that...
Feel free to play around with those. Feel free to explore and play around with those. Absolutely. Let's go back to the homework, because there's a couple things in here that I want to just kind of mention. I've shown you guys some really great file projects that have come out of this assignment. Now, things like these shadows, don't worry about those, although I would encourage you to go into your directional light and enable those and turn them on. I think that's a great thing to do. So this is what it could and should look like when you're done. To help us out and continue to work inside of Unity, I have one other thing, and this is really important before I walk away from your homework. What you're going to be handing in, okay? I need your project directory, okay? I need your Unity project directory, because I want to open up your level, walk around it, and play it, okay? So let's talk about that for a second. Here's my project directory, Pat's Awesome Game. When you're finished with your homework, just right-click on it here in a Mac, go compress, and it's going to zip it up into a compressed archive. There it is. This is what you upload to D2L. D2L does not understand folders, okay? So you got to compress it into a zip file before you can upload, all right? I need the project directory. I don't want your master Luxology files, because I already have them from the previous 2 assignments. I just want your Unity project directory, okay? Make sense? Great. Now, for our lab assignment this week, we have some fun things to accomplish. Our lab, I've given you guys in the resources section this really cool collection of historical buildings. Now, I didn't make these, but they're really kind of fun buildings. Your job in your lab assignment is to import all of these in and place them in an environment of your choosing. And then when you're done, zip it up, submit it to the Dropbox on D2L, okay? It's just all about kind of building that muscle memory on getting things in, creating a scene, and then saving your project directory. Because working inside of Unity is a slightly different beast than working inside of Modo. The more experience and practice, the better. Okay? you can absolutely finish this lab assignment before you head out today, okay? Now, one thing, just as kind of a small reminder, we're not having class next week, okay? So use your time wisely. I know everyone in here is kind of anxious to start spring break, but I was looking at the submissions into the Blacksmith Shop texture Dropbox before class, and very few people have actually submitted the textured version of their Blacksmith Shop. So please make sure you use the rest of class today to wrapping that project up and start working inside of Unity. If you're diligent and efficient, you probably can knock out both your homework and your lab before you walk out of class this afternoon. Rock out of class. I like that one. I'm going to rock out of class today too. Okay? All right, questions, questions, questions. Okay, let's get to work. Let's hit it.